Pornography is a problem infecting the world, and unfortunately, it also affects people of faith. It cripples our relationships and even attacks our youth. What can we do to protect ourselves and our loved ones?
We'll be discussing this today on Real Family Talk. Join us. Welcome to Real Family Talk. On today's episode, we're talking with Bill and Rahel Wells. Bill is a trained pastor completing a doctorate in intercultural studies, and Rahel is an associate professor of biblical studies at Andrews University. We are discussing with them the significant impact of pornography and what we can do to protect our minds, relationships, and children from this crippling habit. They will also share their personal story.
Pornography is a very sensitive and delicate topic to discuss. Yet it is an important one, and one that we cannot ignore. Pornography is a vice that is rampant throughout the world, and it includes the church. In fact, of the estimated 40 million Americans who watch pornography on a daily basis, 47% identify as Christians. This is true even for married persons. Certainly, this is an issue that is plaguing society and the church and needs to be addressed. Bill and Rahel, thank you both for joining us today to shine a light on this problem.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? We know that you were married 5 years ago. How has your journey been so far?
Well, it's been 6 years now.
Oh, okay.
A little bit longer, and we're grateful for that. There are many times when I'm like, man, why couldn't this started sooner? Anyways, so we're grateful for our 6.5 years of being married. And but yeah, our story really goes back. I think we need to start a little bit further back in Rahel's life, and she'll start us off.
Yeah, so I was married before. So I was married to a man who was addicted to pornography, and it was a very difficult first marriage. And but I also learned a lot about pornography in that experience, and also found healing for myself from the trauma of betrayal. And he had multiple affairs, etc. And it was a very difficult ending. I did not actually want it to end. I wanted to have a ministry of reconciliation and to help other people who were struggling with it, but that was not his choice. And so I never really thought I would get married again. I was loving my job and what God was leading me to do, but God worked through a lot of ways to actually help me to help a lot of women, even during that time of when I was single, to find healing and hope in the midst of their struggles with their husbands' addictions. So when I first met Bill, and in our growing friendship, I mean, he expressed to me that he had struggled with pornography in the past. And I was just like, wow, someone talking about it. Like, I just felt that was so strange, because usually people do not admit this struggle at all. And so that was initially very interesting to me and led to many further discussions about it together. So that's kind of where our journeys began to intersect. But it has definitely, of course, affected us in our marriage as well, because of my wounds from my past, as well as Bill's struggles from his past. So it has not been an easy journey, but it has been one that God has blessed us with to be able to help other people become free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit more, Bill, about how that impacted both of your histories. How did that impact your marriage at that point that you got married now and trying to move forward?
Yeah, my introduction to pornography, age 10, by my best friend from church on a Saturday afternoon, and it was good old AOL dial-up modem, and for those of us, I'm dating myself now, but for those of us who remember that, we've got very distinct memories of the AOL dial-up sounds, and you've got mail. And anyways, I remember that room almost as clearly as I'm sitting here today. That experience, 10 years old, and really unprotected, didn't really know what was going on. Being a digital native, and of course, my parents' generation being digital immigrants. These things weren't really understood. So anyways, fast forwarding about 18 years of history of pornography use, pretty heavy addiction in my teens, binge purge through a lot of my 20s. Coming here to college, meeting my wife, and then or meeting her, getting married, dating, all of that. Really, as we got married and moved into that relationship, I just really recognized how 18 years of exposure had really messed up my brain. I was broken, and there was a lot of untreated trauma, unaddressed trauma from my family of origin and other things that I hadn't worked through. So there were several layers, and the pornography really was just a pacifier to soothe my own soul and my own woundedness over many of those years. And so moving into marriage and really wanting to have a good relationship, I had to then wrestle with, okay, I'm giving up this pacifier, but now how do I deal with all the internal stuff that I've largely just avoided and numbed myself to for so many years? Okay. So, that was really pretty much my journey in short, years of ministry, evangelism, Bible work, youth ministry, assistant pastoring, all of that. So this just really affected me through all of that, and just being stuck in silence and isolation, not knowing where to go to for help, who to talk to. When I did talk about it with somebody, they would just say, pray and just read your Bible more, fast. Are you really believing God, and God's power to set you free? You just got to believe better. And I tried everything in the books, but I'm like, this isn't getting me free. There's got to be something more to this.
Well, thank you for being so transparent and sharing so much of yourselves with on this topic and your own journey and the ups and downs. The reality is, as human beings, as a human family, we're all broken and need to be mindful of that and the fact that we need the power of God in our lives. Without that, we cannot make it. What are some suggestions that you have for perhaps married couples to protect their relationship from the devastating effects of pornography?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, just be honest with each other. Like for me, the worst part as the spouse of an addict was the hiding and the lies. Like it's much easier to deal with a relapse into pornography than it is with the hiding and the lies. So the more honesty you can have with each other, the better. And then if there is one partner who is struggling with it, to get help. There is so many really amazing therapists and groups and resources that you can use and you can go through together. So you don't have to suffer in silence. There's plenty of people out there that can help you.
And just thinking about it from the addict side, there's just so many layers of denial and shame. And so for the spouse that senses something's not right, we need help. I just want to encourage you to seek for that help and to really pursue that and persevere in pursuing that for your own self. Get yourself safe. Then really in addition to that, for the spouse that's stuck in denial, be praying that God will break that denial, because God's your father, God's his father. And God can break that denial in such a way that can be redemptive and restorative. And sometimes you just have to confront the issue and say, hey, this is an issue. We need to address it. We need help. What do we do? And so really finding safe people that you can talk to is so crucial, even if it's just one safe person that you can talk to openly.
Right. Well, we want to hear more about that, because I think that's so critical, the safe person, right? Because it's just such a private topic that carries so much shame, that's why there's so much silence. So we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us.
In today's edition of Real Family Talk, we're talking with Bill and Rahel Wells, discussing the malady of pornography and its impact on society and the church. Thank you for staying with us.
So before the break, you guys shared your personal story of pornography in your own marriage. How did you overcome it, and how were you able to heal and move on?
That's such a good question. I think, it was really difficult for me, especially because of my past relationship, to realize that Bill had still a lot of effects from his past addiction in him. And so I really was just like, you need help. Basically, I knew that it was not going to be something that we could do on our own. And so I was already in therapy, and Bill had been in therapy before. So we both are still in therapy, actually, and we're still in couples therapy as well. And we both
Good.
are in groups. So Bill leads men's groups, and he'll talk about that. And I'm in a women's group for betrayed spouses. And I just want to say, like, often betrayed spouses are the ones who are kind of left to the sidelines because everyone's focused on the addict and the problems that he brings, or he or she brings, and that they are dealing with. And so the betrayed spouse often doesn't know where to turn and where to go for help. And the stats show and the research shows that it's kind of like being raped. It's the level of PTSD of being raped to have your spouse continually betraying you with pornography and affairs, et cetera. So it's like the equivalent of a rape victim. And so there's some serious issues that come with that we need help too. And I think it was hard for me to acknowledge that, because I was like, it's not fair. It's not my issue. I shouldn't need to get help.
Right.
But same time, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control what we do with it and how we heal from it.
Indeed.
And so I'm so grateful for the amazing therapists that I have and the wonderful groups that have helped me to come a long ways in healing. I'm still healing and still working, but it's a journey. It's not something that happens overnight.
For us, it was really fascinating that there was a moment where about 6 months into being married, Rahel was like, Bill, you need to get help, or we need to think, about our relationship and anything about our marriage. So she really held me to accountability. She held me to account. She's like, get help. And I remember at that moment, I was like, well, okay, I'll go to counseling with you. And I was still just stuck in denial, just totally stuck in denial. And then a friend of hers said, hey, watch this video series and see how that can start this journey. So we watched this video series called the Conquer Series for Men. And little did I realize that kind of planted the seeds to start a men's ministry in this space, and for my own healing and to help other guys find healing. And so really that's where that whole thing started 6 years ago, just by watching the video series that planted the seeds to say, hey, hope and healing is possible. Here's the science. Here's the Bible. Here's the tools. Let's move forward. And pulling around a group of guys, I can't tell you, I wouldn't be where I am 6 years in recovery with a couple of relapses along the way, 6 years in recovery without my men's support, without my men's group. Without community, I couldn't be healthy. And that's why I think community and safe people are so important for both the struggler and the spouse of the struggler, or the one who's the receiving end of the pain.
Thank you for sharing that, and again, being so transparent. What would you say to a couple who has experienced betrayal trauma and needs to heal? What are some of the practical steps they can take beyond what you've already just shared?
Yeah, I would say to be gracious with yourself, right? It's so easy to blame yourself, but whatever whatever addiction someone has, that's their own issue. Certainly, there may be things that impact it in your marriage, but it was very hard for me initially to realize that. And I kept thinking there's got to be something I've done wrong, or if I was a better person or a better wife, or if I looked better or something, then maybe my husband wouldn't act out. But this is just never the case. And so acknowledging that it doesn't mean that we don't need healing too, but acknowledging and recognizing this is not your fault, and trying to support your spouse in seeking healing. And it can be vice versa. I mean, the woman can struggle with pornography too. In fact, more and more women are these days. And so it's not necessarily just a man's issue. But wherever you're at in that betrayal place, know that it is a process. It is not just a quick fix either. And you have been very deeply hurt, and you need help. And it's gonna be a years-long journey, potentially, depending on how long your marriage has been and how long you've been in those relationships. But that trauma needs to be worked on first before you deal with other stuff. In the past, there was this idea of a co-addict, or you're an addict of the addict, basically. You're addicted to the addict. And now we're realizing, no, people are just traumatized by this betrayal, and they need healing and help through the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah, I think you said something really important. That is that more women are involved in pornography, and in fact, the percentage of women. And Rahel, I know you know that percentage. You've mentioned it to us in previous conversations of the percentage of women. What is it? How many women now? When we
For something like 40% of
Right,
women have.
I think that's what we're hearing, about 40%. So that's huge compared to
It's
like
very high.
maybe 20 years ago when we
Yes.
were looking at maybe 5% or 10%. And I'm wondering how much of that has to do with the fact that now pornography is very acceptable. Like there are therapists who encourage couples to use pornography to enhance their sex lives, or to help them out in their intimacy in their relationship.
Yeah, the affordability, the anonymity, and the accessibility of pornography, the three A's, are just make it so easy to access. And yeah, with many people saying, "Hey, it's okay, you can do this. It can help spice up your sex life." But yeah, I find that just very harming and damaging to the relational unit, and especially thinking about the people on the other side of the screen, those who are being trafficked, those who are being abused on the other side of the screen, the perpetuation of a society or a business model that is uh, taking advantage and oppressing men, women, children. In order to make something that say, hey, this can spice up your sex life, but I'm using content that's been created by largely people who have been trafficked and forced into the production of those materials. I can't see how that can be very helpful. And indeed, because of the way our brains are wired, if our brains are wired to pornography, then of course we're not going to have good sex,
Right.
because our brains are connected with the cyber sex, the virtual world. Whereas it takes time to retrain the brain and heal the brain so that it can become glued to and connected to a person, sexually, intimately connected with the oxytocin that flows between the other individual. And that takes time and effort and working through a lot of the issues that relate to both the addiction and betrayal trauma in the family unit.
Wow. Well, we have to take a break, but when we return, we'll keep talking with Bill and Rahel about how we can help those struggling with pornography and make our churches safe places. Real Family Talk will be right back. Welcome back. We've been talking with Bill and Rahel about pornography and its devastating impact on people.
We've talked about its effect on marriages and even leaders, but we haven't touched on a most sensitive aspect of our children. Unfortunately, even our children are being exposed and affected. The use of pornography is not a small problem, and the average age that a young person is exposed to sexually explicit content is a mere 11 years old. However, research suggests that the average age of first exposure is getting earlier and earlier, with some studies showing children as young as 8 and even 6 years old being exposed as they encounter images on the web or from their friends or even from their parents.
So, guys, can you share with us a little bit about what you think parents can do to create, start a conversation with their children about pornography? And then later we can talk a little bit about the church as a safe place.
That's a great question. We're not parents yet. We hope that that's on our future in the not too distant horizon. But yeah, as being
We are youth leaders.
we are youth leaders in our
Right.
church. And so we're around kids. We're around pathfinders. We're around youth kids in our church all the time. And these are conversations that they bring up to us, like, hey, we're not talking about this. Like, what's this? What's that? How does this work? And so we've recognized that just for us, recognizing first and foremost, as we understand our story, we share our story where possible. That's the first thing. That creates a space of vulnerability and openness where people can share and ask questions. So I think that's one of the first things. If you've got a story, start with your story. Share your story at an age-appropriate level. And that can allow a safe place for children to begin opening up and asking questions.
And then
go ahead, Rahel.
I was just going to say, to continue to have conversations with them. This is not just a one-time, let's have the talk, right? Mm-hmm. This is a continued conversation throughout their lives, so that it's not something that feels so awkward, right? It's like you've continued to have these conversations all through. You're sharing, you're talking, you're sharing about your story, you're talking about what you read, something else that happened, right? So it doesn't have to feel so awkward, like, what do I say when this person asks mm-hmm. me? And I think both of those things can really help create a place of safety where kids can feel that they can be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about resources that people can use to help them in their battle? I don't want to miss that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like when it comes to churches, only 7% of Christian churches in the United States have a healing ministry for sexual brokenness, pornography, sex addiction, etc. 7% of Christian churches. That's a really low number. But as far as resources go, like we could go through a laundry list here, but we just really appreciate Pure Desire Ministries. They have a lot of really great materials. They've got a great book there on how to talk with your kids about sex, as well as family resources that encompass the whole picture of healing and recovery for the whole family, the addict, the spouse, and the children. And so that's one resource that I very much appreciate utilizing in my groups as I guide men into finding healing for their own story, their own lives, their own marriages in my sphere here.
And maybe if you don't feel comfortable initially, you could approach your church and ask if they would have a video showing of something, right? So we actually did this just recently with our Pathfinder Club, and we invited all of our Pathfinder families. Many of them came, mm-hmm. and a lot of parents were just kind of in shock. Wow, my kid probably has already seen this. I had no idea, right? And so just having these times of awareness building at church can then maybe open those conversations, open those places for you to have conversation with your kids afterwards, right? So it's mm-hmm. often when it becomes normalized to talk about, hey, this is happening in the world, then it's easier than to talk with your kids about it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you kind of touched on it a little bit, that sometimes parents might even be sharing stuff, because the truth of the matter is that maybe some parents are also struggling with the issue themselves. Mm-hmm. So yes. That's probably a challenge as well. So definitely it's important for us to just have dialogue about what healthy sexuality is. But you guys mentioned that you work with youth groups, with Pathfinders. How does a Pathfinder group get authorized to do something like that? Because I just want you to share with our audience, because people shouldn't just like talk to other people's children about
sexual
content. So what do you guys recommend for people, again, in that whole context of creating a safe space at church?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have, actually in the Pathfinder curriculum, you in the teen years, the freshmen at sophomore in high school, those are conversations you need to have, actually. So the parents know what the curriculum is. If they have any issues, they can talk with us. But it's just general questions, obviously, about sexuality, healthy marriages, those kinds of things. But what we did specifically, we felt that this is a big issue in our club. I mean, it's a big issue in all society.
Everywhere.
And so we talked to our church board and we said, hey, we want to show this to the whole church and invite mm-hmm. all the families. And excellent. So it went through the church board, and then we showed this video. It was made by Fight the New Drug, which is another really good website. It's done by Christians, but it's made to reach a secular audience. And so they have also a lot of resources. And so this video series also had a bunch of questions. And so we had breakout groups afterwards where mm-hmm. we talked about things. So it's just very general, but again, just an awareness building thing Absolutely. In your church. So to have whatever resources you use, I don't think that matters so much as it is just having something so that you have this opportunity to then communicate with your church members, like, this is happening. We need to be talking about it in our families.
Yeah, thank you so much, because we're closing now. just for those who are watching, we also have a special on our Family Ministries website, family.adventist.org. You just scroll down to the bottom of that homepage, and there are many resources on pornography. We actually want to thank you, Rahel and Bill, for taking the time to speak about such an important subject. As we close, we encourage you with the words of Romans 12:2, to be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Join the fight against pornography and its detrimental effects as you fortify your own relationship to reflect the image of God.
Thank you for watching Real Family Talk. Join us again when we'll share more about strengthening families and inspiring hope. See you next time.